All right, let's dive into Gustave Flaubert's Madame Bovary. We've got a whole bunch of summaries and analyses here, and we're going to unpack this whole tale of love and longing and all the consequences that can come when you're chasing after dreams that just never quite come true. And it all happens back in 19th century France. So ready to meet Emma Bovary.
Oh, you are absolutely in for a treat, Emma's journey. It's really a captivating one, and it all starts with her early life and then, of course, her marriage to Charles Bovary. He's a well-meaning guy, Charles, but a pretty unremarkable country doctor.
Okay, so let's go all the way back to the beginning.
Yeah.
So what's Emma's life like before she becomes Madame Bovary?
Well, we first meet Emma as Emma Rouault. She's a young woman who was raised in a convent school, and that's where she sort of develops a taste for all these romantic novels and literature, and she's just yearning for a life that's full of excitement and passion. But her reality, it's pretty far removed from these grand romances that she reads about.
So she's got these big dreams, but she kind of finds herself stuck in this everyday routine of rural life.
Exactly, and so that's where Charles Bovary enters the picture. He's called to treat her father, and Emma, maybe seeing a chance to get away from how boring her life is, ends up marrying him.
And how does that work out for her? I'm guessing it's not exactly a fairy tale ending, right?
You're right to be a little skeptical there. Emma figures out pretty quickly that Charles, while he's a decent guy and he loves her, he's not exactly the romantic hero that she had always dreamed about. Their life together just doesn't have that spark, that passion that she craves. So she ends up being more and more disillusioned with her marriage.
So she's trapped in a marriage that isn't giving her what she wants. So what does she do?
Well, this is where things start to get really interesting. Flaubert takes us on this journey through all these events that really show us Emma's growing dissatisfaction and her attempts to find happiness outside of her marriage.
All right, let's hear it.
First, there's this ball at the Chateau de la Vaubyessard. It's a really fancy event, and it shows Emma a completely different world full of wealth and sophistication and romantic intrigue. It's like a peek into the life that she longs for deep down. And afterward, she feels even more dissatisfied with her own simple life.
So she gets a taste of how the other half lives and realizes just how different her life is from that ideal.
Exactly. And it sets the stage for everything she does next. After the ball, she sinks into this depression. She stops taking care of her household duties and kind of withdraws into herself.
So she wants more and more, and it starts to affect her everyday life. What happens next?
Charles gets worried about his wife's health, so he decides that maybe a change of scenery would do her good. So he moves them to a new town, Yonville. He's hoping a fresh start will make her feel better.
And does it? Does the move to Yonville give Emma the excitement she's looking for?
Not quite. While Yonville does bring new people and social opportunities, Emma still feels like something's missing. Her deepest desires are still unfulfilled.
So she's still searching for that, something more, something to make her feel whole.
Yeah, and that's when you meet two men who become really important in Emma's story. Leon Dupuis, a young law clerk who shares her romantic side, and then there's Rodolphe Boulanger, a wealthy landowner who's seen a lot of the world.
Okay, so now we've got two potential love interests entering the picture.
Yeah.
Tell me about Leon first. What's his relationship with Emma like?
Leon's drawn to Emma right away. He's attracted to her beauty and her intelligence, and they really connect over their love for art and literature. There's a spark between them, for sure. A sense that they understand each other in a way that Emma doesn't have with her husband.
Sounds like that could lead to some trouble.
It does. However, at least in the beginning, their relationship is completely platonic.
Right.
They have these long conversations, they share books, and they develop this deep emotional bond. But the social rules of the time and Emma's own sense of what's right and wrong stop their feelings from going any further, at least for now.
So there's this unspoken attraction between them, but they're holding back.
Exactly. And not acting on these feelings just makes Emma more and more unhappy with her life and her marriage.
Okay, so where does Rodolphe fit into all of this?
Well, Rodolphe's a whole different story than Leon. He's older, he's more experienced, and he has a bit of a reputation as a ladies' man.
Ah, so he's the classic charming rogue.
You could say that. He's confident, he's worldly, and he represents everything that Emma thinks is missing in her life.
And I'm guessing he doesn't waste any time going after her.
You're absolutely right. Rodolphe can see that Emma is vulnerable and that she wants excitement and romance, and he's really good at using that to his advantage.
So he's kind of manipulating her.
Let's just say that he's not exactly looking to settle down. He sees Emma as a conquest, a beautiful woman who can distract him from his everyday life.
Okay, so we've got Leon, the sensitive guy who connects with Emma on an intellectual level. And then we've got Rodolphe, the smooth talker, who just wants a fling. How does Emma handle these two very different men?
That's exactly what we're going to dig into next. But before we move on to that chapter of Emma's story, let's take a little break.
Yeah, that's a lot to take in. We need a minute to sort out all these characters and their relationships. We'll be right back to continue our deep dive into the world of Madame Bovary. So we've got these two very different men in Emma's life. Now, Leon, the sensitive one, and Rodolphe, the charmer. So where do things go from here?
Well, remember how Leon went off to Paris? And that left Emma feeling even more lost and like she just didn't have anything to look forward to.
Yeah, I can only imagine that just made her want something more, even more intensely.
Exactly. And that's when Rodolphe sees his chance. He really starts going after Emma. He gives her tons of attention, flatters her, and showers her with gifts.
So he's basically playing right into her fantasy and feeding that desire for romance and escape.
Yeah, pretty much. And Emma, she's vulnerable and really wants to be loved. She falls head over heels for him. They start this passionate affair, sneaking around and stealing moments together.
I bet that made Emma feel excited and fulfilled, at least for a while.
Oh, definitely. For a time, Emma really feels alive, like she's finally found the love and passion she's been searching for. But as you can probably guess, this affair is not built on solid ground.
It sounds like it's headed for disaster. Does their secret get out?
Not quite. There are some rumors going around, but Charles has no clue about what's happening. He's too wrapped up in his own problems, both at work and in his personal life.
What's going on with Charles?
Well, his medical practice isn't doing so well. He tries this risky surgery that goes really bad. It hurts his reputation and leaves him feeling insecure and like a failure.
So while Emma's in this whirlwind romance, Charles is dealing with his own issues. What does this do to their marriage?
It makes the distance between them even bigger. Emma's getting more and more unhappy with Charles, and she's completely infatuated with Rodolphe. So she retreats further into her fantasy world. She gets reckless, buys Rodolphe all these expensive gifts, and even talks about running away together.
Yeah, she's really going all in.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling that Rodolphe isn't as serious about this relationship as Emma is.
You're picking up on something there. Rodolphe was attracted to Emma at first. Sure, he liked her beauty and her passion. But at the end of the day, he's a selfish guy who isn't capable of really loving anyone. He gets tired of Emma's intensity and her demands.
Oh man, this can't be good for Emma.
It isn't. Rodolphe realizes that the affair is becoming a problem for him, so he decides to end things. And he does it in the worst way possible.
Yeah.
He writes her a cold, heartless letter.
That's brutal. How does Emma take this?
She's totally crushed. The man she thought loved her, the man she was willing to risk everything for, just dumped her. She falls into a deep depression. She gets sick, and she pulls away from everyone even more.
So she's heartbroken and she's exhausted, both physically and emotionally.
How does she recover from this?
Charles, being the good husband that he is, takes care of her and helps her get better, but he still has no idea what's really wrong with her.
It must be so hard for Emma to pretend that she's just sick when really her whole world has been shattered by Rodolphe. What happens next? Does she try to move on? Well, she tries to find comfort in religion for a bit. She becomes super devout for a little while, but that doesn't last either. It's just another attempt to fill the emptiness inside her.
So she's still trying to find something to make her life feel meaningful,
Yeah.
give her a purpose.
You got it. And then, as luck would have it, she bumps into Leon again. He's back in Yonville after finishing his law studies in Paris.
Uh-oh. Here we go again.
That's right. Seeing each other again brings back that spark between them,
Yeah.
and they start a passionate affair.
So she's looking for fulfillment outside of her marriage again. She's hoping that this time things will be different. Is it?
In some ways, it is. Emma's relationship with Leon is different from what she had with Rodolphe. There's a stronger connection between them, both intellectually and emotionally.
I see. But is it any less destructive?
Sadly, it's not. Emma's even more reckless this time around. She jumps into the affair with everything she's got, almost like she's desperate.
And I bet that recklessness comes with consequences.
Absolutely. Emma's life starts spinning out of control. She racks up a huge amount of debt, borrowing money from this sneaky merchant, Monsieur Leroux. He takes advantage of her. She gets tangled up in lies and deceit, and the pressure keeps building.
So she's really digging herself into a hole. Where does this lead her?
As you can imagine, this can't go on forever. Things start closing in on Emma. Her debts are piling up, and it's getting harder and harder to keep her lies straight.
This sounds like it's not going to end well. What happens to Emma? Does she find a way out of this mess?
Sadly, she doesn't. Things get so bad that she tries one last desperate attempt to save herself. She even goes to Rodolphe and begs him for help.
Oh, no.
But Rodolphe, being the way he is, turns her down cold. He doesn't care about her feelings at all. So Emma's left completely alone and with no hope.
Oh, this is just heartbreaking. What does she do?
Facing financial ruin and crushed by despair, Emma sees only one way out.
You don't mean?
I'm afraid so. In a final act of desperation, Emma takes her own life. She swallows arsenic.
Wow. What a tragic ending to a life full of longing and unfulfilled dreams. This has been a real roller coaster of emotions. Before we wrap up, I need a minute to process everything we've learned about Emma's story. We'll be back in a flash to talk about the aftermath of her tragic decision and what it all means. Wow, I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything that happened to Emma. It's just so sad that trying to find happiness ended up destroying her.
Yeah, it really is a tragic ending, and it makes us think about just how complex Emma was and how the world she lived in pushed her to make the choices she did. One thing that really stands out is how honest Flaubert is about the harsh reality of Emma's situation.
You're right, there's no sugarcoating here.
Mm.
He shows us exactly what happens because of what Emma does, both to herself and the people around her.
And that's what makes this book so powerful, even a little disturbing for the time it was written in. It's not some romantic fairy tale about love. It's a real look at how chasing those desires can lead to disillusionment, especially when you're trapped by society's rules and the limits of what's actually possible.
Absolutely. So, speaking of consequences, what happens after Emma dies? What about the people she left behind?
Well, obviously, it hits Charles the hardest. I mean, he's completely heartbroken. And then finding out about her affairs just makes the pain and betrayal even worse.
It's just so unfair.
Yeah.
He loved her no matter what, never even saw her flaws, and in the end, he's the one left to deal with the wreckage of their lives.
It's a cruel twist of fate. And on top of the emotional devastation, Charles also has to deal with the mess Emma left behind, especially all that debt. She basically ruined him financially, and he's left struggling to pick up the pieces.
So Emma's search for happiness ended up destroying the one person who truly loved her.
It really shows how our choices can have a ripple effect, especially when those choices are driven by selfishness. What we do can have huge consequences for everyone, not just ourselves.
You mentioned how society limited Emma's choices. Can you talk more about that? How did being a woman in 19th century France play a role in her tragic end?
Well, Emma's basically stuck in a world that doesn't give her many options. She's supposed to be a good wife, a good mother, and find happiness only within her home.
And that's obviously not enough for her.
Definitely. She's got this spirit, this yearning for passion and intellectual excitement. And those things are completely stifled by what society expects of women back then.
So her affairs, her spending, her chasing after romantic love, it's all rebellion against those rules.
Exactly. She's desperately trying to break free, to make a life for herself that fits her desires instead of what everyone expects of her. But sadly, it all backfires and ends up destroying her.
It really makes you think that true freedom isn't just about breaking the rules. It takes self-awareness, really knowing what you want and being brave enough to go after it in a way that works and is actually fulfilling, you know? Something that Emma, unfortunately, never figures out.
Right. And that brings us to a really important point from this deep dive. We have to be careful not to mistake short-term pleasure and attention from others for real happiness. Emma's constant chase for romantic love, her obsession with material things, her never-ending desire for something more, it's all just a way to try to fill a void inside herself that she never really faces.
Makes you wonder if we're still falling into the same traps as Emma, even with all the progress we've made. Do we still chase illusions of happiness, or are we still looking for fulfillment in places that ultimately leave us empty?
It's a good question. Maybe Emma's story is a warning to all of us. It tells us to look inside ourselves, to build a sense of worth that doesn't depend on what others think or on buying stuff.
I think that's a powerful message to end on. Wanting to be happy is something everyone feels. But like Emma Bovary's story shows us so tragically, the real path to happiness isn't about chasing after fleeting pleasures. It's about finding a sense of purpose and meaning that comes from within. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Madame Bovary. We hope this inspires you to keep exploring this amazing book and how it still speaks to our lives today.